1902, 10 years old. Susie Taylor was 10 years old when she was outraged by a masked man coming home from school. Still at the age where imaginations run wild with possibilities and boys are gross. Too young to fully understand what happened to her, but old enough to be terrified and old enough to cry. 1912. Hazel Bandy was just 15 years old when she was outraged by someone she thought she could trust. The media quick to pull apart her trauma like vultures, abused, friendless, naive, and when she was alone with Fred White, terrified. The papers made a point as clear as water. Hazel was the helpless gazelle, and Fred the hungry lion. Just 15 when she was arrested for suspicious conduct with the man who outraged her. And just 15 years old when the night guard let Fred White escape, returning Hazel to her father to be abused, friendless, and now terrified for the rest of her life. 32 years later, Racy Taylor, 24 years old, not a child herself, but with a child of her own, was kidnapped and outraged by 6 white men. Blindfolded and petrified, left in the middle of town to stumble around as if in a dark room. Even with the support of women's groups, black organizations, and the governor himself, the men flew away free, crows onto their next victim. It was a crime, an injustice, as if one of the sides on the scales of law had been cut. It was rape. And yes, I said rape, because that was what it was, because people were finally willing to call it what it was, as if a switch had been flipped and suddenly there was no more dancing around the word like a ballerina on her tiptoes, calling it an outrage. But it is also an outrage. It is an outrage that this happens to so many women, so many young girls. Still happens to so many women and so many young girls. 1959. College student Betty Jean Owens was out with her friends when 4 white men took her and raped her. 19, when she was threatened with her life because some suburban white boys wanted to have an all-night party from hell. Out on the hunt on a Saturday night, instead of at a dance like the Florida A&M students. But it was 1959, and unlike the stories you've heard before, those suburban predators were convicted, openly, arrogantly boasting about their crimes like a bunch of demented peacocks showing their brightly colored feathers. And with that conviction, the issue of rape was solved, right? Finally, justice had been served, government officials and politicians patting themselves on the back. A job well done. Acting like they had served freshly made French toast with powdered sugar and fruit and sticky sweet syrup to the defense, instead of a stale slice of bread. Still edible, but not nearly enough to satisfy the history of assault and abuse that women have faced. As if this single conviction is undeniable proof that the system isn't broken, as long as a rapist or two gets put away every once in a while. As if the system in place doing the one thing it's supposed to do in the first place is a cause of celebration for a 4th of July party, fireworks and all. But God forbid a woman come forward that is from anything less than a middle-class Christian home, because only morally upstanding Christian girls can get raped, right? Only they should get justice. You never know what those other girls were wearing, or what they looked like. What if they smiled at their assailant, or walking home alone late at night, got in trouble with the law, or at school, did drugs, weren't virgins, didn't report the crime? Well, they had to be asking for it then. Because the only explanation is that they had something to hide. It could not possibly be the trauma, the fear, the pain, the shame, or simply just not knowing what to do. Hoping that someone is brave enough to come forward so they can finally say, hey, me too.